Redwater, a land infamously known for witches, mages, alchemists, and herbalists. Rarely would you see the werewolves of Houndsville meddling in the land of Redwater, nor do the vampires from Cascada share the night with them. However, on this particular night, werewolves, vampires, witches, and hunters, all that hate each other, have fear building up in their souls. For Nazdukh, the vampire elder, the ancient priest that was once forgotten, has now awakened. Nazdukh, the vampire elder, walked into a church of Redwater. The building was old, almost as ancient as the vampire himself. His boots thumped against the wooden floor, creaking as he stepped. There was a priest standing at the podium in front. He was counting sacks full of coin donated to the church, coin that was supposed to be used for the betterment of the village and for educational facilities for children. More so, churches in Redwater also served as a shelter for the homeless. It gave them a home while they found small jobs around the villages and towns, while being taught about discipline and closeness to each other. Coin that was now being put into the pockets of the one doing the teachings, despite the ministries paying them handsomely. When the plague hit the town many years ago, people turned to their faith for comfort. But now priests and pastors have been doing far worse. Nazdukh remained in the shadows casted by the moonlight shining through the church window. His dark priest-hooded-like cloak had covered his pale skin, red eyes, and razor-sharp fingernails. His voice, soft but eerie, more like a whisper that makes the hair stand on the back of your neck.
Greetings to you. Last night there was a fearsome battle that took place in this land. I fear the one who I share a blood tie with might be in danger. I heard growls, hissing, and flesh being torn apart. Now would you be so kind as to point in the direction of where such a battle might have occurred?
The priest at the podium didn't even look at Nazdukh. How would I know? He replies. Why don't you bother somebody else outside? Can you not see I'm busy? Like counting coin was a more pressing matter than the village being in danger. The vampire elder bowed his head, thanking the man, then turned around to walk away. But he snuffed. Then he heard 2 heartbeats, young and innocent, pounding like drums being beaten. He caught the delicate scent of grief, like rain striking hot stone. Then he turned around and walked closer towards the priest, his pale skin showing more this time, but his red eyes were still too dim enough to see.
Is this church home to orphans?
The priest at the podium dropped the coin in frustration. He cursed in annoyance. Look what you've made me do now. I've lost count of my coin.
Is this what's become of priests? Were we not anointed to look after our people? For most of these orphans, we are their first role models. We become their mothers, fathers, even their best friends, showing them how to survive in this world. But you, I know what you've done.
The priest at the podium grew angrier. His arrogance pushed through his nostrils as he roared with rage. How dare you accuse me of such a thing, he exclaims. I am the most well-respected priest in this village. Such accusations against me is the same as blasphemy. What accusations, though? Nazdukh didn't even state his crime yet. Then the vampire stepped out of the shadows. His pale skin glistened in the moonlight as his red eyes could pierce a hole through the priest's chest. His sharp fangs grew longer, extending themselves on a dime. His fingernails long and razor-sharp, able to slice through bone. The priest backed up, gasping with fear. "Demon!" he exclaimed. "Demon!" Then he began reciting the exorcism. "We exorcise you, every impure spirit, every satanic power, every incursion of the infernal adversary, every legion, every congregation and diabolical sect. Therefore, cursed dragon and every diabolical legion, we adjure you. Cease to deceive human creatures and give away to..."
Why say it in English? Were you expecting me to combust into flames? Or were you looking for signs of my blood boiling and my skin sizzling? Shall I complete the exorcism for you, the way it's supposed to be done?
The vampire elder walked closer to the priest with each word that he uttered.
Exosamuste, omnes immundus spiritus, omnes etenica potestas, omnes incursu infernalus adversari, omnes legio, omnes congregatio et secta diabolica, ergo drago. Please stop. You can recite that 1,000,000 times, but I will not leave, for I am no demon.
Nazdukh's fingernail grew much longer and pointier, like bone claws extending from his hand. Just before the priest at the podium could even blink, the vampire elder sliced off his hands and legs, then ripped out his tongue. Amidst the screams of agonizing, torturous pain, the vampire said to the priest,
"You shall drag yourself on the ground like a wounded animal. Those tiny granules of soil and crushed stone will seep into your open wounds. Try to tell the villagers what you have done and feel the blood from your cut-out tongue curdling in your throat. Try to knock on their doors with no arms and plead your case with them. Mutter whatever prayer you know to whichever god you have as the light leaves your eyes. But know this, heaven isn't the place you're going to, but you may pray nonetheless. Pray the faith of these villagers is stronger than the pain they feel for their children."
The villagers of Redwater found a large sack of coin in the middle of the village with the 2 children that were held captive by the priest inside the church. They were safe, but the marks on their wrist from the shackles remained, scars of distrust they would hold in their innocent hearts for the rest of their lives. They told the rest of the villagers what the priest had done to them inside the church, had done to most of them in the village. Now they were not silenced anymore. When Nazdukh walked away from the village, he heard screams and the sounds of bones crackling and skin sizzling. The villagers had burned the priest at the stake. Nazdukh left the village feeling ashamed. Maybe he felt relief that he wasn't a priest anymore, or maybe he felt regret. Maybe he could have prevented the change in the system if he was still saving people through his divine power. Nevertheless, he strolled in the woods of Redwater before he stumbled upon a town. Folk were distraught and shivering with fear, witnessing the horror that lies at their feet. This was the same town the hybrids had stormed in a few nights ago. Nazdukh bowed his head, greeting the townsfolk as they were wary of his appearance. They filled him in on what had happened as he knelt down, examining the creatures at his feet. He tasted the creature's blood as the townsfolk backed away in fear. They told him there was a man wearing a long black coat that saved them from these creatures, though they feared that he might not be alive anymore. Large black wings pushed out of his back and his face changed into something far darker and scarier. Veins crawled up his skin like tributaries on a map. They pointed at the direction that he flew in as Nazdukh bowed his head again, bidding them farewell. Houndsville was the place that he was heading to. They said that if he saw werewolves nearby, then he was on the right track, but if he saw vampires, then he was heading in the opposite direction. When the ancient vampire priest walked away, he glanced back at the creatures once more. They had fur and gnarly fangs like werewolves, but their ears and fingernails were like vampires. How strange, Nazdukh had thought. He'd never seen anything like this before. But more confusingly, he recognized the scent of their blood, a scent that he would never forget. Why did the werewolf-vampire hybrids have the blood of Cecilia Rosenthal, the Duchess of Cascada? When the ancient vampire priest strolled through the forest of Redwater, he could not help but be taken aback by its beauty. It had been so long that he felt the moonlight kiss his skin. He felt the flora with his pale hand as he walked past it, feeling emotional as he touched it. He heard the insects croaking and the trees bellowing with their twisting branches, trees that were far older than he was. They say the trees in Redwater tell a story if one sits long enough to listen. You hear the battles that took place inside the forest, the swords clanking against each other, the monsters growling, and the battle cries from great warriors that once graced the place with its bravery. How much time had been lost, he had thought, but the path ahead for redemption would now be even longer. Redwater's forest was the largest in the land, leading to all the surrounding major cities. West would be Cascada, east Houndsville, north the land of Freya, and south led you towards the sea. Nazdukh had no knowledge of these newly named places anymore, not when he was asleep for so long. He never realized he was making his way towards the boundary of Cascada, the land infested with vampires. He stopped dead in his tracks when he heard the nest of vampires lurking nearby. Nazdukh wanted to avoid trouble as best as he could. The vampire elder spilled enough blood during his time. Now he was trying to make up for it. Nazdukh rubbed his bald head underneath the cloak, shaking it gently while he thought. It was easy getting lost inside this forest. Therefore, he would just have to backtrack and head in the opposite direction. But then, he heard the vampires talking among themselves while devising a plan. They spoke about capturing the creature Nazdukh was searching for, matched the description to the T, but these vampires kept mentioning Dracula and Mercer, two names the vampire elder had no knowledge of. The vampires spoke about how Mercer, the vampire mercenary, commanded them to bring in the creature alive. They wanted to study him and find out why he shared similar abilities with Nazdukh, the vampire elder. They were going to carry out tests and experiments of this vampiric creature, all inside Dracula's castle. Nazdukh frowned as he pondered. He always knew the castle belonged to Cecilia Rosenthal. Why was this Dracula now occupying it? Hybrids having her blood, experiments being done on vampires. Why would she allow this? Maybe the Duchess doesn't have knowledge of it. Maybe Cecilia Rosenthal had been dead for a very long time. He stepped out of the shadows with his hooded cloak covering his head. His eyes red but not glowing, almost like they were on standby. The vampires turned back instantly, hissing at him, showing their sharp fangs. By their foolish instinct of wanting to attack first, Nazdukh knew they had no idea who he was. Werewolves, vampires, witches, mages, demons all knew better than to charge forward at the vampire elder.
Forgive me for the intrusion as well as my rudeness. Though I cannot let you capture the vampire creature, it would be best if you return to whatever place you came from, and that would be the end of it.
There was a vampire woman that stepped in front, her hair long, dark and wavy, and her eyes crimson red, leaking blood from her eye sockets. The nest of vampires had just fed on a family that was behind them not too long ago. Nazdukh only saw the victims' bodies when the vampires picked up their heads. He heard the others whispering to this vampire woman, calling her Anne-Marie. They spoke to her like they were her servants, so she had to be someone higher up in the command chain. 13 vampires stood up from the ground, wiping their bloody faces from the humans they fed on. They stood behind Anne-Marie, extending their fangs and claws as the red light shined in their eyes. She commanded them to charge forward, and so they did. Eerie, pale, male and female vampires with long fingernails and sharp fangs, dashing forward at the speed of light. Nazdukh sighed in disappointment. He was so quick that it seemed the vampires dashing forward, his very own species, were moving in slow motion, though he never moved, or so it seemed. The vampire priest stretched out his arms to the side, waist height, then tilted his head back as his eyes glowed white this time. Veins of shadowy vapor wrapped around his body, their edges flickering like torn silk against the moonless sky. They didn't rise, they sank, as though gravity itself bent to his creepy malevolence. Faint whispers accompanied the dark, shadowy smoke, like voices trapped inside, clawing to be heard. Each curl of the darkness pressed in with a hiss, devouring his outline until he was a little more than a silhouette. The cloud of dark, heavy mist-like smoke then traveled towards the vampires like a sandstorm covering a city. While only for a few seconds, the shadowy smoke suffocated the vampires moving past them. Nazdukh from smoke to human had appeared behind them, while the vampires in front fell to the ground like dominoes. But it wasn't a fall of supernatural phenomenon like the smoke itself did something to them. It was Nazdukh moving as such. The vampires fallen to the ground had holes in their chest, roughly all the same size, and in the vampire elder's hand were their hearts. Nazdukh sniffed and dropped their hearts to the ground, now face to face with the female vampire leading the charge. She backed up in fear, her red eyes fused and switched off to normal, like a damaged light bulb. The vampire elder grabbed Anne-Marie by the jaw and pulled her closer towards his face. His sharp nails dug into her skin, piercing the insides of her mouth. Up close and personal, she realized the vampire elder, whom they speak of like they knew him, was now about to kill her.
I'm gonna let you live because you're gonna be the one to convey this message for me. Whoever this Dracula is or Mercer so you speak of, tell them the vampire creature you are hunting is not yours to hunt. Tell them he is protected by the vampire elder. If I see any vampire from whichever part of this land approaching him, if I so much as hear you speak about him again, these claws would do much more than keep you at bay. Do I make myself clear?
Though Anne-Marie never said a word, she was trembling uncontrollably with fear. Nazdukh tightened the grip on her jaw and pulled her closer.
Do I make myself clear?
He pushed Anne-Marie as she stumbled and fell backwards. Nazdukh licked the blood off his fingertips as he turned to walk away. He heard werewolves engaging in battle coming from the opposite direction. Though, from the sound of it, it didn't seem like special class werewolves. Those can be a bit troublesome even for the vampire elder. Rather, Nazdukh heard naturally born werewolves, those that walk on all fours. These men were afflicted with the lycanthropy curse from birth. These wolves were accompanied by alphas from their packs. While sharing the curse of lycanthropy, alphas were different. Much larger, stronger, faster, bipedal, and unique in their own right. Nazdukh dissipated into a dark cloud of smoke, moving with the wind towards Houndsville, hoping the werewolves have not devoured the creature he's searching for. The werewolves of Houndsville were indeed engaging in battle. They were facing a vampiric creature that wore a long black coat. It had large bat-like wings, untidy hair, sharp teeth that were more monster-like than fangs. This creature moved like a being possessed. It kept hissing at the werewolves, and whenever one pounced, the vampire creature would swipe it away with its large wing. Nazdukh arrived at the scene, skidding on the ground from the speed that he traveled at. There was no way the vampire monster, despite being as strong and frightening as it was going to defeat the werewolves of Houndsville. There were too many of them, more than Nazdukh could even count. The vampire whistled the way one would call a stagecoach. Then the werewolves turned and looked behind them. Once the snapping of jaws and swiping of claws had stopped, Nazdukh had a moment to look at the creature properly. So much of pain and sadness in his eyes. Sorrow, regret, and fear. This monster was afraid of what he had become. He was fighting whatever was inside of him. Nazdukh also noticed the wounds inflicted on the werewolves were to hinder them, not to kill. But how long would this creature be able to hold back for? The vampire elder recognized this transformation all too well. Now was the time for the vampire priest to show why he was the most feared. Nazdukh's eyes turned black and murky. He looked more frightening than he did before, but his fingernails were neither long nor sharp. His fangs were not protruding like before either. However, the power and heaviness emanating from his body was something no one had felt before, not from a vampire at least.
Sagite extenebri, voscosolum exosazavi.
He mutters the incantation in an eerie whisper, one that only he could hear. The ground on either side and behind him began trembling, and then creatures of the night, monster-like beings, sprouted from the ground, crawling on all fours in front of Nazdukh. They were large creatures, slightly bigger than the natural-born werewolves. They moved as shadows, as the same dark smoke that surrounded Nazdukh was now the same thing controlling them. However, these creatures were not vampires, they were far scarier than that. Nazdukh's incantation translates to, "Rise from the darkness, you whom I once exorcised." You were once my enemies, but now turned allies. The demons the vampire priest had once exorcised had now served him on a path for redemption. They were never demons serving hell, nor creatures that fought against heaven, rather the epitome of shadowy monsters existing inside the veil. Then the vampire elder says, "Begin." The shadowy creatures charged forward as Nazdukh walked through. They cleared a path for him, so much so that Nazdukh wouldn't even feel the breath of a werewolf against his skin, let alone their gnarly teeth or claws. They never kill the werewolves, but they never go easy on them either. With swift claw swipes, pounces, and massive strikes, the werewolves of Houndsville were either being wounded till they changed back into men or knocked out entirely. However, their restraint was directly linked to Nazdukh's intention. Do not be fooled by the leniency of the night creatures. They've emptied out cities when Nazdukh was on a much darker path. When no wolf remained standing, Nazdukh's eyes returned to normal as the shadowy creatures absorbed into his body, vanishing as seemingly as they were summoned. He walked towards the vampire creature crouching on the ground. It groaned, not in pain but in despair, looking for this curse inside him to come to an end. The vampire elder placed his hand onto the monster's shoulder and whispered,
"Forgive me for what I'm about to do. You will understand in a moment."
And so Nazdukh snapped the neck of the vampire creature. This wouldn't kill it as it was ultimately a vampire, but it would put him out for a while. When the creature collapsed to the ground, its hair returned to normal. Its eyes were soft and innocent, like a young man trying to be better. His face handsome and dashing, his skin smooth but awfully pale. This creature, now turned back to man, was Fesliyan Hunt. Nazdukh gave a warm smile at his innocence. Fesliyan's hair was much shorter now compared to when Nazdukh had turned him into a vampire during the Redwater massacre 100 years ago. The vampire priest pushed his arms forward as large black wings flapped open from his spine. He carried Fesliyan away, flying into the calmness of the night, just a few moments before the sun pierced the sky. Few hours later, Fesliyan Hunt, the vampire cop, opened his eyes to find himself in a dark yet cozy cave. The bats hid inside the darker spots of the cave, but where he was laying down, there was an oil lantern providing him with light. His long black coat was kept beside him, folded neatly with his blood-covered white shirt. The only thing on his pale body was a plant strapped to his back and shoulder bones, with ointment massaged into his skin. He tried removing it, but he heard a voice echoing from within the cave, the same spot the bats were sleeping in.
"You should keep that on you. Some call the plant Hajor, succulent vine part of the grape family. Usually helps for its medicinal properties, mainly for bone healing and pain relief."
Nazdukh emerged from the darkness and sat in front of Fesliyan Hunt with his hands clasped together, the way that he once listened to the pleas from the people that he helped.
"My name is Nazdukh, and I'm the one that brought you here."
Nazdukh, I've read books about you. You're the first vampire that has ever been created.
"Yes, that is correct."
"What happened to me? Last thing I remember was fighting the hybrids in Redwater, but I have no memory after that." Fesliyan tried waking up, but Nazdukh gently put him back down to rest.
"Your wounds would take a better time to heal. Your arm was broken and your shoulder bones dislocated."
"Why are you helping me? I know who you are, what you are. Those legends tell tales of the evil you have done in this world. If you want to kill me, now is your chance. When I get back up, vampire elder or not, I'm going to rip your heart out of your chest."
"Those legends do not tell lies. I have done evil in this world. I've brought a great tragedy onto this land. I've fed on innocents, I've terrorized villages and towns. I've defied the gods who I swore to serve my entire life. However, I have not made wives widows or husbands widowers, nor have I orphaned children."
"So does that justify everything you have done?"
No, it does not. There's no excuse for what I have done. I could blame the demon who spat blood into my face that night. I could blame the curse from hell to make me crave their blood. I could even blame the gods for casting me into a vampire. But I have tried to fight the monster they have made me, and I am trying to make up for it ever since. Have you not done anything you regret?
Ferocious Hunt never answered. For a moment he felt embarrassed. Who was he to judge Nazdukh when he fed on humans the very first year of being a vampire? Who was he, an inspector in the Redwater police force, pretending to be a human? Still, it doesn't excuse the vampire elder from the crimes that he committed. Forgive me. Lord knows that I'm the last person to be passing judgment unto you. He saw blood bags near him stacked neatly and filled to the brim. These blood bags, it's not human,
No, not human blood. From wounded animals that were going to die anyway.
Ferocious Hunt took a sip to replenish his strength, then asked once again, "Why did you help me?" The vampire cop had no memory of the creature that he transformed into. In his mind, the wounds and body pain he felt were caused from the hybrid battle that took place in Redwater. The werewolves attacking him in Houndsville exists now only as a dream. Nazdukh refused to tell Fesliyan about the transformation. The vampire elder knew what Fesliyan was going through, to feel like you're drowning with no way of coming up. So Nazdukh lied to the vampire cop, told him that he picked him up from the village of Redwater surrounded by hybrids on the ground. Nazdukh didn't know how the guilt of harming innocent werewolf men in Houndsville would sit with Fesliyan Hunt. Then the vampire priest asks,
"Say, you wouldn't happen to know where the Duchess of Cascada was, now would you?"
"Miss Rosenthal, she's been dead for centuries. Rumor had it she fell ill from blood contamination. Why?"
"Miss Rosenthal was the one that helped me sleep for so long. No reason though. Just wanted to know if she still occupied the castle."
"She did seem like a lovely woman. Well, at least according to the history books. Now Dracula occupies the castle. He's the one that sent the hybrids to Redwater. His minions and him are performing necromancy for the hybrid operation. He's the one that turned me." Nazdukh looked down for a moment. Now was the perfect chance to tell Fesliyan that Dracula wasn't the one that turned him, rather the vampire elder himself. Now would be the perfect opportunity to explain the blood tie Nazdukh has with Fesliyan and why he woke up from his slumber. The vampire cop gathered his things as he held his body in pain. "Forgive me, but I must be leaving now. There's so much going on in Redwater and I need to visit the police station. Captain Mills is probably worried."
"Is there anything I can help you with?"
"No thanks. You've done more than enough for me, which I'm very grateful for, by the way. Hopefully you and I will meet again so I can repay my debt. Farewell." As night fell, Fesliyan Hunt left the cave wearing his long black coat and bloodied shirt. Nazdukh, feeling saddened, looked at him walking away. Blood ties with vampires work differently. Males and females are often bound to it by love or intense desire for each other. Though in some rare cases the blood tie serves as a much deeper bond, depending on the vampire and the one being turned. Nazdukh whispers under his breath,
"We will meet again. No harm will ever fall upon you, my son."